are perfect candidates for elder law. And what I found out that elder law came in two flavors: emergency or pre-planning. And I didn't have the resources to do emergency work. Grandma just fell and broke her hip, and we've got 30 days to get her qualified for Medicaid. So I gravitated towards the pre-planning, and that's really just estate planning. So I kind of, again, shifted again and started focusing on estate planning exclusively. And that's what I do now. Now, what was interesting about that is that this was all pre-COVID by a long ways, but I had always been a techie owing to my background working at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always wanted to be able to work wherever I could plug my laptop in.
Right.
Now, for people today, that's a trivial statement because we're all aware of the cloud and we're all aware of these resources that we have on the internet. But 15 years ago, we didn't have any of that.
Right.
Okay, so how do you can you become a digital nomad in the legal space then? And particularly, I'm a Mac guy, all Apple all the time from the very first Mac, 128 Mac. I'm the OG of Mac Apple users in the legal community, at least here in this area. And so I was able to, with my tech background, work a configuration that allowed me to take my work home. And on my laptop, when I came back, it would sync up with my desktop, and that's how I maintain my files and what have you.
Very cool.
So,
like at an era when people weren't doing that and weren't
no, it was
which wasn't, like you said, wasn't as popular, wasn't as widely used. Or
no.
It's funny how you have to be more techie now to use a Windows or some like.
So I was an early adopter of technology, and I recognized that because I was light years ahead of most solo practitioners, that it gave me the leverage to be able to outperform firms with multiple staff members. So I was able to work more efficiently. I was able to work more efficiently.
Interesting.
And more profitably because of my use of technology. And as a result of that, I started getting, a lot of inquiries. How do you do this? How are you being able to work from every place and any place? How are you able to maintain your client data privacy?
Lawyers were asking.
Lawyers were asking me this. Lawyers wanted to know, wait a second,
Your secret.
what's your secret? You don't have a fax machine? No. I said, I had a fax machine when I worked for NASA 20 years ago. That's 20-year-old technology. I'm not using a fax machine. I was one of the first ones to have a website. Then I became kind of a sought-after speaker on the use of technology in small firms. And I spoke a bunch of different places, ABA Tech Show in Chicago and Maryland Bar Association, DC Bar Association, all those kinds of things. So then I got exposed to some entrepreneurs and people who were starting to exploit the digital marketplace, starting to be able to leverage social media. And I wasn't real happy with some of the coaching that I was getting along those lines. So at that point, I was a podcast junkie. I listened to probably 15 hours podcasts a week, something along those lines.
Was this the beginning of podcasting?
Yeah, this is the beginning of podcasting. So pre-COVID by about 5 years. So, and, it's funny how we measure everything pre-COVID, post-COVID. Right? And so I said, well, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. And that's about all the thought I gave it. Yeah, I think I'm going to start a podcast. And I figured originally what I thought I was going to do was interview really smart attorneys in this local area, kind of war stories and what it was like to practice back in the day. I pretty quickly realized that had a limited appeal. And so I said, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just interview smart people and hope some of it rubs off. And in those days, the average length of a podcast was about 3 months. I said, if I could interview people for 3 months,
What do you mean?
uh,
3 months? Like podcast start to finish.
start
Like
to finish, they would peter out, you know, and that's like what 12 episodes if you're doing it weekly. I thought maybe I'd do it daily, so that way I'd get 90 episodes in, and I
But
figured
your
if I,
goal was to make yourself smarter in the law space.
yeah, for me, it was a way to get free advice, and I don't shy away from that. I had three types of guests, right? Successful solo or small firm practitioners. So we would do a lessons learned, what I did right, what I did wrong, what I wish I could have done differently. The second type were entrepreneurs, people who had a mindset or a business viewpoint that I think lawyers would be well advised to pay attention to. They themselves weren't necessarily attorneys. And then the third category was what I called gadget folks, people who had a product or a service that solo or small firm practitioners might find useful. So I started The Law Entrepreneur. That was the name of the podcast. Um, and we ran for 8 years, right? 400 episodes. Here I thought I was going to do it 3 months. I ended up doing it 8 years every
Insane.
week. And it was phenomenal. It took off like nobody's business. I was shocked at how popular it became. I was voted in the top 10 legal podcasts many years running by lawyerist.com.
Wow.
And after 400 episodes, I just woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm done. I did 400. I never thought I'd do 40. I did 400 and it was great. I loved pretty much the whole thing, the whole experience. I learned a hell of a lot. And so I just signed off out of the blue. Said, this is my last podcast. It's been great. 8 years. Thanks, everybody. And then I learned that there were people that would say, whoa, 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 whoa. Where are you going? What are you doing? You can't just walk away from this. I went, sure I can. And I said, no, you've got 400 hours of programming here of content, legal content that's relevant. We'd like to buy it. And I said, you're kidding me. And nope. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up selling the podcast to my good friend Sam Malai, who operates My Legal Academy. Some people may know him from his previous iteration of Legal Funnels. He was one of the first guys to capitalize on the funnel architecture for digital marketing. So Law Entrepreneur is now owned by My Legal Academy. And I thought, well, that's great. I loved it. Thanks a lot. And then I go, whoa, again, not so quick. Not so quick. We'd really like for you to co-host with us. And I said, oh, well, how long? As long as you want. So I've been co-hosting the show. Not every episode, but most of them. And so now the Law Entrepreneur, I think, is at episode 428, still going. Sam and his team run it now, and
Amazing.
I'm just a talking head.
That's amazing. So
Offers,
here's my question. I'm going to pause it.
yeah,
You have an amazing story. You were a chef, you worked in NASA for 20 years, you were a software engineer, ran a martial arts studio. You sold that martial arts studio in order so you can go to law school at 48. You found a job at 50, 50? When you're
51.
51 to be a lawyer at a small boutique. You opened up your own firm in around 2007. One of the first ones with a website. One of your biggest successes, you were able to work from home because you were techie, and that allowed things to be more efficient and more profitable. You were one of the first ones with a website. And because you were so techie, you became a sought after speaker. You were one of the first podcast people. You had such a successful one that you were even able to sell it.
Yeah.
It's an amazing story. And first of all, amazing.
When you put it all together like that, it's no wonder I feel so old.
You don't seem old at all.
I just celebrated my 60th birthday, just to put it in context.
Amazing. So, I'm just going to ask a couple of quick tips for lawyers trying to get themselves out there. You've done it. You had the podcast. You have the website. You are the techie guy. You worked at NASA. What are some takeaways that lawyers can do to get themselves out there?